Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
All right. Well, welcome to another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel, and
I'm Nicole Saunders.
Nicole, you're just a regular now, and I think I've had you on the most this year, and it's been really a delight. So, and I think users are really enjoying it as well. So thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had somebody out in the world last week say, "Oh yeah, I've been listening to your podcast," and I was like, "Oh,
awesome!
That's cool." I was really excited
Exactly.
to hear that people do in fact listen to us, Chris.
I know, it's kind of funny because people will reach out to me, and now I get sometimes spam stuff. But hey, can I be on your podcast? And they have nothing to do with community management. And I had this one guy that wanted to, and I let him be, and I haven't pushed it out yet. But it was around crypto communities. But really, this guy's a crypto CEO or something. And I was like,
interesting.
Yeah, and I was like. And I told him, I don't even know what this is. So what does a community really look like in the crypto, because you've seen some of these on, job postings, or, people are looking for community leaders that have all this experience in crypto and all this stuff. And I'm like, how long has this been out? And how do you have so much experience in crypto when it just really came out? Like, how do you even, so anyways, but it's really cool that people are listening to us, and I'm very excited about that. But what I really want to talk about today, well, probably a lot of things, but one is you've been gone from working for a long time now. I mean, you still work at Zendesk, but they let you have a lot of time off, I guess, after you've been there for so long, or how's that been?
Yeah. So one of the really cool perks of Zendesk is after 5 years, you get a 6-week sabbatical.
Oh.
And so I hit my 5-year anniversary in February.
You said, I'm out of here.
Well, honestly, I wasn't going to take the time right away. But then it just sort of ended up kind of making sense this summer. And, I had always imagined that when I took sabbatical, I'd go travel Japan or backpack around Europe or go to Australia. And it ended up just becoming this is going to be an old fashioned summer break. I'm going to read books and ride my bike and do some writing and eat lots of ice cream and hang out by the lake.
Ice cream.
Yeah,
what's your favorite ice cream?
Oh gosh, for years it's been chocolate peanut butter, but this summer I've started to get more of a taste for the vanilla based ice creams.
Okay.
So there's one at my local ice cream shop that's vanilla ice cream with caramel and peanut butter cups and cookie dough chunks, and I love that one. And I love anything with hot fudge on it, but I like chunks of things in my ice cream. I like to chew on it, I guess.
Do you drink any beer or anything? Just, it's a Peers Over Beers, so I don't really.
I know. I feel I'm going to admit this to you from 6 episodes in. I don't really drink much these days. I used to be.
I don't either.
Still beer aficionado. I used to work at the Great American Beer Fest in Colorado and hung out with microbrewers and stuff. The last few years, I've just kind of backed off drinking. So actually, my new favorite is Athletic Brewing Company has a whole series of NA beers that are actually pretty good.
Really?
I've been enjoying those mostly this summer, to be honest.
You said it's local?
No, Athletic Brewing Company I think is national. There are a couple local microbreweries that are starting to get into doing a couple of NA beers, which I've been really pleased with. There's one out of Milwaukee. It's called the River West Stein beer, I think. And that was always a favorite. And they started producing an NA version this summer that tastes darn close to the real thing. So that's been my kick.
Cool.
Alcoholic beers, and I'll still occasionally have a good IPA or something, but it's pretty rare for me most of the time.
Yeah, so my wife and I have been doing we went on vacation. I guess I could call it. It's called Trans Rockies. So 2 weeks ago we ran this 120 miles in Colorado, and
that's amazing. Up at altitude at that.
Up in altitude. I'm in Dallas, Texas. So it was definitely a challenge. It was a 6-day kind of event and everything else, and so. I did have a beer afterwards, but beforehand, I drank a little, but I was just trying to stay away from it because I knew anything that I did was going to affect my hiking abilities for those 6 days. And so, although a great trip, I've stopped drinking a lot of beer, but I did have one the other day. So, anyways, so tell me a little bit more about your your time off. It's
Yeah.
always good to get time off. I'm glad you took
Yeah, it's good. Oh, me too. Yeah, so I've got about 10 days left here before I go back to work. And it's been amazing to have so much time to do all the things I love.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to do for a long time is write a book. Don't ask me what it's about. I don't know. I've just always wanted to write a book. And so I decided to use some of this time to start doing free writing every day and kind of brain dump and see what came out. And some things are starting to take shape. So knock on wood.
Cool.
Somewhere in the next 2 to 5 years, hopefully I will finish and publish something. This is a big goal. And I guess this is my official, like, putting it out there in the universe and saying to everybody, I'm going to try to write a book.
Is it, are you thinking personal or business or, anything like that?
I've had a couple of different ideas. The ones that seem to be resonating the most are sort of like, the genre I can best explain is like memoir as self-help. Like, here's all the crazy stuff that's happened in my life. Maybe you can learn from it.
I love how you use self-help in this.
yeah, right. Community builder, servant leadership.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's help others. I have had some thoughts about working on some community related research and writing as well. So who knows? Maybe I'll have 3 books by the end of this whole thing. But spring break has been good just to indulge that and see some friends and play some music and get outdoors a whole bunch. It's
good.
The hardest thing I think about working full time is being in front of a computer all day. It's been really nice to not have to do that quite as much.
I agree. I mean, it's kind of on our pre-show, you're talking about how it's really nice to kind of really, let loose and not think about work too much and things like that. And you mentioned that, the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was really nice, but then, you kind of started missing doing the work, and just being focused on some of that.
I do. I mean, one, I miss my team. I work with some really great people, and it feels like friends that I haven't seen for a little too long. I don't know what's going on in their life right now. So I'm excited to catch up with some of those folks. I'm really excited because we actually got approval. We're all going to go to the CMX Summit out in California. It's going to be the first time most of my team members have met in person.
I was thinking about going to that. Maybe I will go.
You should come. Drew and I are both going to be on a panel and speaking there. And I think it's just such a great event. So it's a good time. It's like summer camp, my community people.
Fran and his team, I don't know if you know Fran, but he's the VP of community at Upwork.com. And he's going to be there and bring some of his team folks there. So it should be fun.
Awesome. Well, we should all get together. We have a period
maybe I will.
here.
That'd be cool. Maybe, I was thinking about kind of if I go out there, then just having a bunch of 15-20 minute peers over beers, with different people within, but it seems like a lot of work because I have to carry a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
so I don't know. We'll see.
Just
but
record it on your iPhone. It's fine. Everybody will understand.
I'm telling you, they won't understand whenever you start listening to that shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this sucks. I'm not gonna. You really need good sound. And I could probably buy something expensive.
There you go. I bet you could.
Anyways.
But yes, I'm excited to see my team. But it's also, I've really realized I kind of miss sort of the day-to-day sense of accomplishment that comes from being at work, getting through your meetings and checking off the things on your to-do list. And, certainly when you're on your own time and you and I are chatting a little bit about this in terms of what am I going to do when I retire someday? And it's like this all the time. You do have to come up with, your identity outside of work and the things that you're going to do that are going to bring you meaning and a sense of accomplishment outside of it. But at least with work, some of that's kind of built in. You don't have to sit down every day. What's going to be a meaningful to-do list for me today?
Exactly.
So I miss that. I really feel like work in some ways is kind of the thing that helps hone your brain a little bit and keep you sharp. And I was joking with you earlier how I've never understood watching people who've retired where they'll have one plan in the day. They're like, I got to go to the grocery store at 3 p.m. And somehow they can't do anything else that day. It takes up the whole day. And I really think it's one of those tasks expand to take up whatever time you allocate for them. Yeah. And if you don't have the pressure of a work schedule on your time, it's amazing how much just doing little household chores and things like that can expand to take up the whole day. So
Well, that's
the
true. I
brain
remember, I have to tell
works.
you a little story. So I was, I could sit down at home, right? Like, and think, all right, I want to do the dishes and sweep and mop the floor. And because it needs to be done. I mean, you have to do that anyways, pretty quick.
Right.
But then, I'll just take a quick nap and then I'll think, okay, I probably should put up these clothes that's right next to my head that my wife, yeah, maybe I'll do that later. And then, just kind of get on my phone, do some bullshit on the phone, and then realize 2 hours have passed. Not just, I was doing dumb stuff and I haven't done one thing. Like I thought I was going to do the dishes and the floors and didn't do it. And I'm like, oh shit, I got to make myself do it. You know what I mean? So procrastination is kind of my big thing, especially chores. So, sorry.
I don't struggle too much with procrastination, but I will say that like I think when you've got sort of the time pressure of working, it makes your free time, it is a little bit easier to focus and to be like, okay, I've only got 3 hours of free time tonight. What do I really need or want to do at that time? And I think you appreciate it more.
Yeah. For sure.
You get to Saturday and you're like, yeah, it's Saturday. I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this. And even maybe like this is like, I'm gonna watch 3 Harrison Ford movies and relax on the couch. It's gonna be awesome. Whereas right now I'm like, yeah, I can do that today or tomorrow,
whatever,
Tuesday, whatever, and time is starting to like melt together. So I'm a little excited to actually kind of get back into it. But I think the biggest thing and what I'm really hoping to return to work with is a new perspective. One, my company is a super like cameras on company for Zoom. And being away from my computer a little bit more, I think I'm going to try to adopt a little bit more lax attitude about cameras or like, hey, let's all turn them on for 5 minutes and wave at each other and then turn it off. Because it's amazing to realize how exhausting it can be to be on those Zoom calls all day, just staring at a screen or a camera lens. But the other thing is I'm really hoping to go back at some of the challenges that we've been working on, especially some of the big meaty ones that take a long time with a little bit of a new perspective. And I think sometimes you can get so close.
Do you have something in mind? If not, it's fine. I was just curious, like,
we've had a couple of long-term things. Like one of our big things is that our community was really started as a support community. And for a couple of years now, we've been really trying to work to not alienate the support side of it, but to try to bring a broader kind of conversation into the community and have it do more than just your technical questions. And that's been a big challenge to solve. And we've been kind of, working with all these different tactics. And it feels like we've been like kind of beating our heads against a wall of like, well, we tried this, and we tried this, and then we went back to the first idea. And so I think it'll be helpful to get that break and that separation and then sort of come in with fresh eyes and see if there's maybe some new approaches that we can
I love it. And I think that's a big one. And, because I feel like I saw something from Rich Millington the other day that says, well, it is way easier to start a support community than it is a topical community, or you can see it as it's topical or, thought leadership or whatever. I thought about that for a minute and I thought it really is. I could start a support community in a minute. I'm not saying that there's challenges and it's hard, I'm not saying that there's not, but you think about like, because people have a question about your product and need help with it, right? And they're willing to ask anywhere and everywhere. Mostly, you still have to do the engagement piece, strategy, tactics. You have to still do all that stuff. But then when you start thinking about, well, for you guys, it could be support leaders. What's the best practice on creating a support, support program, for your customers, and because there's a lot of although that's interesting and you probably find people interested, who's going to talk about it? Who's the key people and how do you get it at mass? It's a lot harder I'm trying to do some of that too as well. And I just think, wow, like I can't get people to fucking talk about this stuff, it's really hard to find speakers that have built an MDM practice from ground up, or how do they think about data governance and what does a successful data governance practice look like? Or I don't know, because those are a lot harder, those are all, well, it's different in every organization. It is, but you can take some of those things. And so I love that you're thinking about that, and we should probably talk more about that later.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's an interesting point. And we hadn't talked about this in the pre-show, but I'm willing to go down this rabbit hole for a minute.
Okay.
thinking about that difference of like a support community versus like a community of practice. And, one, I think it's really hard to take an existing community and pivot it into something else, right?
Yeah. You keep what you have probably, right?
Yeah, but I think it's like, you really kind of have to relaunch it, right? You need to have a clear moment of what this was is kind of shuttered, if you will. And here's what it's going to be going forward. There needs to be a pivot point. We've really been trying to sort of like incrementally take those steps.
Yeah.
And it's hard just because you've got so much momentum built up behind one way of engaging. I also think that like with support communities, they're a little easier because they're transactional. Somebody has a question and somebody else can go in and be like, oh, here is the answer.
Yeah.
And then you're done. And that's pretty simple and easy. Whereas when you get into community practice, you talk about those best practices, you're asking people to take a lot more time to answer something, right? Instead of you just
thoughtful, right?
Code. Yeah, they have to think about it. And two, it's more of an open-ended question, right? We all know from doing surveys and things, if you ask a yes or no question, somebody will, click the yes or no button. But if you leave a space and say, please tell me about your experience with this, most people won't fill that in. And a community of practice, that's kind of the difference, is you're looking for more of these long form ongoing conversations. And so I think it is a real challenge, but it is also where a lot of the meat is. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that lands in the middle, like the example with support practitioners. It's one thing to say, hey, how do I set up this automation?
Yeah.
It's another thing to say, hey, what are best practices for running a support organization? But in the middle is where there's some really interesting things of like, what are some recommended workflows for setting this up? Or what are some ways that other people have done things? And that's where we find the greatest insights and where people get really excited, is when somebody's willing to go a step beyond the how-to, but they don't have to get into writing a white paper, right?
So I think one is you've got to think about, and that we can continue down this rabbit hole because I think it's a good one, is you got to understand what are the business goals and what are you trying to accomplish at the end of the day, right? So when I think of those type of communities that you're topical and or thought leadership's so high level, but it's sort of kind of along that lines, or the practice of support, or whatever you're trying to do. What are you going to try to accomplish? What we do know though is that Zendesk technology or Reltio technology only relates to those people that have that technology, right? How to do this thing. So you're probably not going to hit a lot of prospects. I mean, you'll hit some because they might be evaluating your product and that kind of stuff. So it's not like, those support communities don't help with some of that, but it's a lot less, right? So, in my mind, a support community kind of looks at upsell, cross-sell, potential, new features come out, adoption, et cetera, obviously support deflection. So that's kind of what, to me, a support community does. But when you start looking at some of those other communities like you're talking about, and like I would like to also do, is then you start kind of getting the realm of, hey, you can find more VPs of support, right? Like, and more leaders of support, directors and things like that, when you start talking about the practice of support programs. And and then there's all this meat from bottoms to top and to the middle that you can kind of think about. And so, lead generation, great blog potential stuff, topics, and then you start kind of thinking about, those. That's what I think about when I think of those types of things. And some of the business outcomes goals are more referenceable customers, more leads coming in, all that kind of juicy stuff that marketing loves, but that the organization loves, because at the end of the day, we need new business. But we also kind of have to think about I don't know that we leave kind of that support piece either. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot to think about, and a lot of, what I would just say is, for the audience, is just make sure you know what you're trying to accomplish and what are those business outcomes that, that you're trying to get at the end of the day, right?
Well, and moreover, I think it's making sure that you know what your audience needs.
Yeah.
I've said this so many times, but I think the mistake that a lot of organizations make when they launch their communities is they think about what they want the community to do for the business.
Yeah.
But if that's not aligned to what the people that they're trying to engage actually need or want, it's never going to take off.
I think that as a community leader, you have to say that. I think they think about that. because, I've talked to CEOs, I've talked to leaders, within customer and or marketing space, and they think, community is going to solve all their problems and come up with all these business outcomes. And then you're right. You have to think about, well, what is it that the community needs? Because we as the community leaders have to think about our community, our people, the relationships and things like that. But we are doing this for some business outcomes too. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so.
Well, I mean, that's really that is in a nutshell, that is the role of the community professional, is to find that sort of intersection point in the Venn diagram of what does the business need and what do the customers need, and how can I facilitate the intersection of those two things in a really meaningful and compelling way. And I think it's where, kind of going back to that original point about how support communities are so much easier, it's like, because every business is going to have customers who have questions about how to use their product or service or tool. And so, you look for a need the company has is for people to be able to use it, their product or service. A need that the customer has is help on being able to use it effectively. Boom. There's an opportunity for community. And I think what we're seeing is as communities mature, it's that question of like, okay, how can you go beyond that instructional piece, and how can you start to help your customers with more than just your service or product, but really the whole field of what they're doing it for. And it's been interesting trying to like,
by the way, support's not going away, right? Support is not going away.
And in fact, I would argue that if you try to launch a community that's not focused on support, you're still going to get technical questions, and you're going to need to know how you're going to deal with it when you get those support questions in your community.
For sure.
But I can definitely see why, we've talked in the past about how there's so much content and training and education for community managers on how to launch your community, how to set up your strategy, how to do basics. And there's not as much about how to pivot it. And I think one of the reasons is the real answer is that it's very hard to pivot or shift a mature community. And the best way to do it is sort of to relaunch it and to apply a lot of that original strategy, or, ideally just do it right the first time and make sure you've got it in place.
Well, you also, you guys started 5, 6, whatever years ago, or maybe longer.
15. Okay. This is our 15-year anniversary, Chris. It's craziness.
Okay. So you started 5, 6, 7, whatever years ago, at Zendesk, but
so almost 10 years old when I came in. So that's part of what I've been working with. Yeah,
and that is a challenge in itself. It's probably a good conversation to have is, how do you kind of walk into somebody else's kind of strategies and ideas and thoughts, let's say it's a mess, but it is, you've got to untangle a lot of things that you just don't know,
Well, and I'll tell you, like, when I walked into Zendesk, there just wasn't a lot of strategy. It was sort of a community that had launched and was trucking along, but there wasn't any one person that was centrally in charge of the oversight or the management of all of it. It had been a very collaborative effort, which is beautiful from a community perspective. But at a certain point of scaling, you're running a community by committee or with handoffs between different teams, and it gets a little messy. And so that's where we've been that was kind of our starting point when I joined the company.
When you say restart a community, a lot of things go through my head. So, and I've never restarted a community, especially like that. And so how do you, what do you do with the already support stuff that you have, right? And, or do you just kind of start a community for practitioners of, support, for example, and just kind of keep this other community going, because it is very important, probably a lot of business value, I would assume, but, there's some need for this thing. Is it like, I don't know, what do? You start a Slack group and just, because Slack I love Slack, but not really the best way to start a community, in my opinion. Maybe with 5, 10 people, to kind of say, hey, this is what we're doing or whatever. But
well, on the Slack note, I think Slack is really great to sort of augment or create sub communities. Like, we've had a lot of luck with it, where like we took our super members in the community who we've designated as our community moderators, and we created a Slack space for them.
I like that. That's a good idea.
That has created a really tight, really awesome community amongst that small group. But Slack doesn't scale, right? We can't put 20,000 people in a Slack instance of the community. It's not going to work. So I think Slack has a really good role in a community ecosystem, especially given that most of the community platforms out there these days don't offer like chat rooms or DMs or something like that. So Slack sort of augments that real-time engagement piece. As far as relaunching, we haven't done it yet. We've been kind of working on this sort of slow pivot. And as I've thought about this over the years, I think some of it has to do with like a redesign, right? You need some kind of visual cue that this is a different space.
Yeah.
I think that you don't want to lose all the support stuff that exists in the community. And so, if we were to take this route at Zendesk, and I can't tell you what the next 6 or 8 months will bring at this point, but if we were to take this route, or if I was to do this really for any organization, I would really look at how can you integrate all of the support stuff as a part of the community, but have a bunch of the other stuff sort of built out around it. And so it's clear
I believe that there'll be repercussions if you got rid of the support stuff. When think of case deflection, some other things, Google kind of,
I actually have a story about this, Chris. So we did a big sort of relaunch of all of Zendesk systems over the last couple of years.
Okay.
We'd been working out of one Zendesk instance since the beginning of time with the company, and it was clear that it was time to move into some of like the new, what do I want to say? Basically just sort of start over, right? There's a lot of like stuff that was gathering up. And so we didn't significantly change what it looked like on the outside, but we did actually migrate everything over to a new instance of our stuff. And in the process, there was a big debate about how much should we archive, right? How much of what exists in our knowledge base and in our community is out of date, is irrelevant, is clogging up search results because...
Fair enough. Definitely need to get rid of some of that shit, probably.
And so we actually got fairly aggressive with it. We archived a lot of stuff. So we kept everything that's been new in the past, I think, couple of years. And then we highlighted about 2,500 posts and conversations that had high page views, or we actually let some of our community members vote and say, hey, is there a post that if it disappeared, you would be sad about it? Tell us and we'll keep that one. Which is a great way to engage the community around this whole exercise.
Great.
And so we ended up migrating about 20% of our community content into our new instance, and the rest of it got archived, didn't get deleted. We still have it in a record somewhere if we ever need to refer to it. And in some ways it did what it meant to do, right? It cleaned up a lot of stuff. It made a lot of the posts more current. But a couple of repercussions. One, a lot of links got broken because there are things that point to the old posts. Now, maybe that's okay because the old post it pointed to was no longer current. It definitely messed with our SEO, right? Our Google use went way down. It used to be community posts would show up pretty high in most search rankings, and we've been slowly rebuilding that.
Takes time.
And despite being so thoughtful about what we took with us, and gosh, I got to give credit to Brett Bowser and Dave Dyson on my team. They spent hundreds of hours reading every single post in our community and looking at stats and figuring out which ones we should move and which ones we shouldn't, and interviewing community members and doing surveys to find out. And there were still things that 6 months later, people are like, how do I have archived this one? Where did it go? So even after being so thoughtful and putting in all of that amazing effort, there's still stuff. And so I think it is something to really think about. If you ever relaunch or migrate, you have to be really careful with what you do and don't take, and how you structure it and what you do with it. I don't necessarily regret things archived, but I've learned a lot of lessons from the whole experience.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, maybe it was better, in the long run for the community to kind of be, taking out some of that stuff. But, again, there are repercussions in the short term, and, I think that you just have to have a good content strategy afterwards, right? To kind of think about, well, what new content are we going to push out, and what are we doing to kind of make up for that, especially when you think of the Google stuff, because
that's such a great call out, Chris. You're so right that the next step isn't just like, okay, now we're just going to wait for the community to repopulate itself, but how are we going to rebuild some of these things? And one of the things that we did do is we took a few hundred posts that we thought were really good, but that were out of date. And we actually reached out to those members and said, hey, would you want to repost this with some updates? Or we rewrote a lot of content and republished it as well.
But I think rewriting it and republishing it starts the clock all over again, right? So, it's like, it's fine that you do that.
It's not great with Google,
it's good and bad.
But it's really good with the longevity.
It's good with Google later. The other thing is, and you got me kind of thinking about, this new way of kind of thinking about community from a thought leadership, whatever we call it, topical, I don't know, but is that I think you're also going to have to think about a content strategy around, those kinds of topics. So maybe, and what I've been doing even as of recent, because I've been thinking about the same thing, is I'm not going to relaunch it just because it's just me, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I just hired somebody, but it's,
yeah, I definitely want to dig into that.
yeah, but it's you really kind of have to start thinking about a strategy around content, and what is it that what is it that you want to think about, what is it that you want to cover, how can Zendesk help within that thought leadership piece, right? Because that's probably where you're gonna have to kick it off in the first place, and then have programs, like I'm a big fan of creating a program that allows me to do multiple things, like webinar programs, et cetera, so I can write content, Q&A, et cetera. And so what I've started to do is kind of look at, let's say Reltio. And so instead of thinking about Reltio specifically, but I'm thinking about a master data management as a practice. And so how do people start that? What does that look like? And where do you begin? Yes, technology is a piece of master data management, but you have to get buy-in. It's costly. It's those kinds of things. And so I've started kind of slowly but surely pushing out content in that way. And then, I'll have some videos, but then I'm getting some blogs written, and then I've started having kind of Q&As, with Reltians around, let's say, data quality. And instead of saying data quality is a product, although we have that, what does data quality mean, and how is the quality of data important, and why is it important, and those kinds of things, and maybe doing Q&As with an expert around that without talking about Reltio, right? And so kind of getting the appetite of your members. You already have a community, so why not push it out to them as well to see if they're interested and who is interested. Then when you start finding those people of interest, yeah, you can relaunch and do all that stuff. Because I absolutely agree that there's going to be some UI design stuff that you're going to want to do, but start kind of figuring out who those people are outside of your organization, in addition to your organization, so you can both kind of and there's maybe even partners that you can kind of partner with. Like for us, it could be a Deloitte or Accenture, or I don't know, whatever, that think of these things all day, every day, that talk to these kind of people all day, every day, and are thought leaders in that you can just bring in. You know what I mean?
Well, I love how you're thinking about that, Chris. And, it's part of it is trusting your community members to be smart enough to realize, like, okay, well, here's a brand that makes data management software, and I'm learning all sorts of cool things about data management, and I can connect the dots that, oh, hey, maybe I should look into their software. And I think that's really where you get that difference between communities that are overly markety and don't really take off with people, is when you're sort of like pushing that connection, or like only talking about your product, versus recognizing, like, really what my community members need is like help with their job, be better at what they're doing, help in their career or in their
Why do you think
field.
we're having this peers over beers? Because we're trying to help people with their job. At the end of the day, these are best practices, and how we think. It's getting our thought leadership out there.
Yeah, we're trying to help other community professionals understand. Now, neither one of us is trying to sell a community platform ourselves either. But if one of us were, that would be, this would still be the way to go about it. This would still be the conversation I'd be having. It would be just about the tool, be about the whole field.
I don't have enough to say. Like, I use a company called HireLogic for my platform. They're great, overall, but I don't have enough to say to speak about it every single time I get on a Peers Over Beers. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably several conversations we can have about platforms and what they do, et cetera. But, if that's all I talked about, it would be so boring. You know what I mean? I think it would.
Well, we don't even have to like plug those things. You can just have those conversations that are relevant to people, because that's the thing is, I think about this every time I talk to somebody about starting a community. We all have so many social media accounts, and we get text messages, and we get our Slacks. I don't know about you. I'm regularly logged into 9 different Slack workspaces.
I've got like 5,
Just my email can get overwhelming sometimes. So what the heck is going to be compelling enough about another online community for me to go create a profile and log in and participate on a regular basis? And the only way it's going to be something that I'm really going to engage with at that level is if it's something that solves a problem that I have or serves a need that I have on a regular basis.
Do you know any communities that are doing, stuff like that, like, kind of that thought leadership, or, would you say there's one or two that you really like that do that?
Well, I mean, I spend most of my time in community manager communities, right?
Yeah.
Like I spend a lot of time in the CMX community.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's probably the biggest one. And CMX is part of Bevy.
Yeah.
CMX hosts all sorts of things that are community management
Mm-hmm.
related that aren't specific to Bevy or even things that Bevy necessarily does as a platform.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a really good example of how that works. The other one I really like, I'm, a big outdoors enthusiast. I love REI's community. And this isn't B2B, this is a B2C community.
Yeah.
But I can go on there to find out about equipment and gear and things that I'm thinking about purchasing.
You could ask the community, and the community will probably post links. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
But I can also go on there and just ask about hiking trails.
Yeah.
Or how to train for something. And so I think that's the key, is like, that's a community I visit even when I'm not looking for something from REI, because it serves the need that I have on a regular basis, which is to get more information about the different things I enjoy doing. And so that's the key, is to really build a community that serves that need and doesn't just have a niche thing. Otherwise, and I think you see this a lot with support communities, you're only going to go to a technical support community a couple of times a year when you have a very specific technical question that you can't find in the documentation. Right. So if you're looking to build a community where people are engaging on a regular basis, it's got to be more than technical support. It's got to be more than your product or service.
Yeah. Again, I think there's reasons to have technical communities. So, and they solve some big problems.
100%.
For sure.
They're super valuable. Like, don't get wrong there. But I think if you want your community to do more than just answer a couple questions here and there,
it's really hard, especially from a B2B standpoint. Like, and if you have big time professionals, like, you have to give them something that they want to want to come back. So when I think of, a senior VP or VP of something, right? They're probably not coming to a community.reltio.com or community.zendesk.com and posting shit. You know what I mean? What they might be interested in is to listen to a podcast around how others are doing these certain things, or a video, or maybe it's a webinar or something like that, right? Or connecting to others in a way. And so depending on your audience, if it's the leadership thing, you need something like I don't want to call it an advisory board, but something that allows them to connect, with other leaders in the space that is a little bit more hands-on rather than just an online community. So you have to think of communities, in my opinion, in different ways, right? So those people that care about those technical questions are probably the people using your product on a daily basis, all day, every day. The VP of support or VP of anything else probably knows about Zendesk or whatever, obviously, but they're not using it all day, every day. They don't even, they're probably thinking of some features, but their directors and or managers and or technical people are using it on a daily basis and pulling reports and all that kind of shit. So, I just think that you have to build programs for the audiences of your choice. And when you do that, then, they engage in the way they want, and you're creating ways for them to engage the way they want. You know what I mean? That's my thought on communities around kind of higher level type stuff. There's a lot of different ways to do it, right? And I don't know that an online community is the way to do it for executives or higher level people.
100%. And that's the thing, is I think the other thing is, oftentimes when we talk about community, people are thinking really narrowly about like an online community or a social media community.
Exactly.
But you can have different community products, as it were, for different segments of your audience. And what kind of product is going to sell to a developer is a different product than is going to sell to a VP. Exactly. And so you do have to have different programs and different kinds of offerings that are all part of your community program. And I think it's one of the places where in the community industry that things start to get really blurry.
That's true.
Right? Between what's a community thing and what's a marketing thing and what's a customer success thing. And this is where I think that there's so much potential for community, and where you're starting to see organizations putting chief community officers in place and building out community as a whole organization, because it takes all of those things that are interrelated that used to fall, oh, this belonged to success and this belonged to customer marketing and this belonged to community, and putting it all in the community bucket and recognizing, hey, our customer advisory board, our special luncheons for executives, our developer forum, our Slack instance for startups, all of those things are community and need to fall under one umbrella instead of being divided up between all of these different teams all over the company. But I think we've got like so many more podcasts we can do talking about this, and how community is so much more than just an online forum or digital space. It's all of the things that you do that connect customers to one another to solve problems.
I agree. And somebody that's doing a really good job of it, and you'll have to talk to her one day, maybe you have, is Allison Boudreau over at Calix. So she's the leader of the community and their academy. So, I sent you guys an email. So the four of us actually, to try to get together and just have some podcasts around, maybe women in communities and things like that, because I'm highly interested in hearing some of that stuff. The last thing I'll say, because we didn't get to this point, because I know you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
I was gonna say, we'll have to do this in our next conversation, I guess.
Yeah, we'll introduce it, because I'll probably have more of a, but I did get to hire a person that's going to be very junior for the community, and they'll be helping me with the executive council and a lot of online community stuff that I'm really excited about. And so we can talk about that, but I think we'll have a broader topic around, hiring, what do you do, onboarding, a bunch of stuff like that, because you're really good at that stuff. And, you can give me some really good advice around it. So
I would love to. Well, Chris, congratulations on your first hire. That is so exciting. It's a huge milestone, and congratulations to whoever it is that comes on board. We'll do an official congrats after they start. And yeah, let's talk about that next time. I'd love to dig into hiring, onboarding, training, all of that.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in for another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel, and
I'm Nicole Saunders.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.